in Yaakov, and it is on in Brachot, page 29b. So it says, Amalei Eliyahu the Rav Yehuda, Achua the Rav Salah Chasida. So Eliyahu, the prophet, said that he came back. Don't forget, Eliyahu will come back many times in the Gemara. So Eliyahu, a Navi, came back and he was talking to Rav Yehuda, the brother of Rav Salah Chasid, and he said to him, gave him advice, Lo tirtach v'lo techata. Do not become angry and you will not sin. And so Rashi explains that it means Lo tichas, you shouldn't become angry, shemitoch ha'ka'as, because from the midst of anger, atali de chet, you are going to come to sin. So that's what happens when we get angry. That first of all, anger itself is a sin. We're not supposed to be angry, because anger is akin to idolatry. Because what we're saying is, remember the old fort, that when I get angry, it means that I feel I'm in control, and I throw God out of the equation. So if I'm throwing God out of the equation, it means that I'm God. Interesting. And therefore, anger is not a good trait. So he says, do not be angry, and you will not come to sin. You just say, Akol b'dei shamayim, everything's in the hands of heaven, and that's the end of it. Kisha'ata, and then he said, v'lo taru, and taroi, you should not become drunk with wine, v'lo techata, and you should not come to sin. So either way, either anger or drinking will cause you to do dumb things. Okay, that's the best way to look at it. And then he says, Kisha'ata yotze l'derech, when you're going to go on the road, Hamelech bekoncha v'tzei. So you should ask the king, and then go. So what's going on here? Who's the king? The king is Hashem. So Rashi explains again, Hamelech tul rishut, take permission from the king. That's it. And so that with the king, like I said, is Hashem. And the Gemara will ask, Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Chisda, Rav Yaakov, I'm sorry, Amar Rav Yaakov, I'm reading what names I'm not having here. Amar Rav Yaakov, Amar Rav Chisda, Zu Tefillah Derech. They ask the question, Maya Melech Bekonech, what is the definition of the Melech, the king, that you're asking to leave? Who you asking? So he said, and how do you ask basically? So Amar Rav Yaakov, Amar Rav Chisda, Rav Yaakov said in the name of Rav Chisda, Zu Tefillah Derech. This is the prayer that we say when we're going on a trip. And where does it say it here? It's here it is. So the Eitz Yosef says, and the question of what is this king that we're asking permission from? It says that he appears that the Gemara's question is on the language of that you should go and ask the king, which is implied that you should go ask permission. And if he says no, if he says to him go, he'll go. If he says not, right? If I'm asking permission, it normally means that you have the permission to say no. But here we're not saying that, because the person, it says, ask permission and go. So what happens if the king would say no, as it were? So it cannot be that sort of a question. It must be that I'm going to go anyway, and that's what it says. According to that which she tells him, he has to do. Fine. So if that's the case, so the Eitz Yosef asks, why does the language say and go? He says because the word say go teaches that by force he's going to go on his way. Perhaps you should. So that's Shema lo yomru lo, let's say. So perhaps they would say to him, you shouldn't go. There's that That's why the Gemara will say we're talking about tefillah derech. because if I'm going to ask somebody if I can go, and then the person has the ability to say no, and I'm going to go anyway, so it can't be that. That's why Rav Chisda, Rav Yaakov says it on the name of Rav Chisda, what we're really talking about is tefillah derech. Fine. Now the question is, Hechi matzli la. How should I daven? How, in other words, in which position should I say tefillah haderech? So Rav Chisda Amar Me'ubma. Rav Chisda said one should be standing when saying tefillah haderech. And Rav Sheshet Amar Afilu Mahalech. Rav Sheshet said you can even say it when you're going. I'm walking or I'm driving already, whatever the case is going to be.
Driving, you wouldn't be standing.
Right, right. In other words, he's not demanding that we get out of the car or off the horse or off the bike or stop in your tracks. He's saying you can say it as you're going. Now, what would be the problem? What are both of them trying to accomplish? What's the argument about? Standing versus walking.
So like when you make a bracha, you usually stand. So like.
Oh, not every bracha. When I'm making a bracha over food, I don't stand.
If what?
If I make a bracha over food, I don't stand, right?
Oh, you're sitting.
Right.
Yeah.
So then I'm sitting.
Because you're going to eat sitting, I guess. Yeah.
But what we're talking about here, really, and this is what we'll get into, is when do I show proper respect to a bracha? In other words, which mindset should I make the bracha? If I'm standing before I go on my way, I'm taking the time to pray to Hashem, so I'm focusing on what I'm saying to Hashem to protect me from all the dangers, the perils of the road. By the way, that's the only reason I have to pray anyway, because there are perils on the road. And certainly in those days and even today, there are perils on the road. So I have to pray that I'll be brought safely from point A to point B. That's number one. But so now the question is, when I'm praying, when am I going to have the most intent? What's the most kavanah? The most kavanah will be when I stand. Yeah. That's what Rav Chisda wants to argue. Rav Sheshet said, no, you can have, the kavanah you're going to have is also while you're going. Because what's going on? When I'm going, I'm already starting the trip. And I'm going to be more relaxed when I'm going. Right? Because I'm getting there sooner. If I'm going to wait for how long it takes me to pray, I've lost that much time. So I'm going to be under pressure for waiting. You understand? So they're both looking for when am I most relaxed, as it were. When am I have the most kavanah? The most kavanah. So again, for Rav Chisda, that's when you're standing. For Rav Sheshet, that's when you're going. That's what he starts. Okay, so here we go.
I don't think he says it in here, at least not what I'm looking at. Is it that you're not supposed to say it until you're like right at the outskirts of town?
Halacha says that, yeah. So halacha says you should not say it until you're outskirts of the town, or
you're not on the road yet, because you're in the town, huh?
Right. So if you're going to wait for that here, you're going to be in big problems, because from here to Chicago, you are going constantly through places that are town to town to town to town. So what people
question, especially like when we drive up and down the East Coast.
Right. So what people normally do is they wait till they hit the highway or something like that. So even that could be a problem unless I'm going to pull over. If I pull over, that's one thing. But if I'm going to keep driving, unless I know it by Baal Pev, I know it by heart, that's something else. But even there, it's not the greatest thing to do. But so some people will say it. If somebody else is in the car, the other person will say it, and you'll just say Amen. If some people, I myself, when I'm leaving, it's much easier for me to say it here. I have kavanah here. I'll just say it before I leave. I get in the car and I go. And since I'm driving a decent car at that point, I'm usually driving a renter car, so I'm not afraid of it being, because I'm leaving town. Around here I can keep my car, but for a long trip, it's just not worth me to take my car and worry about am I going to make it past South Bend. So I rent the car and to go to Boston. Besides, it's even cheaper, by the way. It came out it's cheaper to rent a car.
Really?
I'll tell you why. Because of the wear and tear on your car. Because remember, you're putting miles to go to Boston or to go to St. Louis. You're putting 1,000 miles in your car.
Yeah.
1,000 miles of wear and tear, the oil change, everything else. So it's cheaper to take their car, and it's better for your car in the long run. You ruin their cars. What do you care? So when I'm going with their cars, and it's always a new car, I'm not a year or two, so I'm not worried about it breaking down. So that's not my problem. My problem is that I get from point A to point B safely. So I can say the bracha here, and I'm more relaxed. If I have to sit on the highway, it means I'm going to have to pull over. And then again, where do you sit on the highway? At which point?
Yeah.
Because there's constant civilization. So some people make a mile out of the way, or whatever. People make rules like this. I think it's a mile or 2 miles out.
In other words, you start getting into rural, semi-rural area.
Right.
The houses, a farmhouse is not going to be all that far apart. Or is that what's the distance is supposed to be? That when the last
just
house
uncivilized. It's just uncivilized.
Oh, you're saying because it's all farmland, unless it's all wooded area or something.
When I was traveling from Canada to Boston, I remember that I would bedavka look at my speedometer when I would pass a house. So if I would be stuck, if God forbid the car would, because I was driving my car at that point, not that, I was driving a car, my own, and so I always said if my car breaks down, I need to know how many miles back I have to go. So I would always look, and it came out to be about every 5 miles there was a house. Imagine that, the 5 miles between a house. But going from one house to the other, you're not going to make them to derech. Right? I'm not going to do that, even though there's 5 miles in between. But I'm not going to do that. So it is what it is. So like I said, you make your bracha wherever you can feel comfortable doing it. But here, like I said, they were in reality, but in this point, one was arguing you stand, and one was arguing while you're going. So now watch what happens. So Rav Chisda v'Rav Sheshet, ahavike azle be'orcha. So Rav Chisda and Rav Sheshet were going together on the way. They took a nice trip. Very nice. So now what happens is Rav Chisda Kai Matzle, and Rav Chisda stood there and he davened. He wanted to feel Sederach, so he davened. So Amar Lei Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet said to Shamei, he said to his servant, "My Kai Avid Rav Chisda." So Rav Sheshet, who was blind, Rashi explains, said to his servant, "What is Rav Chisda doing?" Armalei Kai Umatzle. So the servant told him, he's standing and he's praying. He's saying, it's Fisaderach. Very nice. So Armalei Kai Umatzle. I'm sorry. So Armalei Ukman Nami Ledidi Ve'atzle. So he said to the servant, "Stand me up also, and I will pray." And Rav Sheshet, remember, said, you can walk while you're praying. You can go. You can travel. And yet he's saying at this point, let's stand. We're going to stand here right now, and so I can pray. Miyoto vel tikre ra. Rather, I should be called good than bad. So Rashi explains. He says, "Hol aniv yachol l'parel me'umat." Since I can stand up and pray, because my friend is standing and praying, so I don't want to be called evil to pray while I'm walking, even though it's permissible to walk. It was permissible, I could do it. I ruled you could do it. But since he's not doing it, and therefore I have time, as it were, the best situation is to stand there with awe and trepidation and to pray. Okay. And so but the reason I love that part of the Gemara was, you see an interesting thing. Even though I may know of a heter, and I may rule that something is permissible, it doesn't mean I always have to use it. Sometimes I can play along with everybody else, and there's no what's the expression? No foul, no harm, no foul. Okay, so even though we know something's permissible, I'll give an example. Even though that I know that I can go 42 minutes on Shabbos and Shabbos is over. If I'm davening with a group that's holding 60, 72, 90, whatever it's going to be, there's no reason I have to get excited. I'm with them, fine. So I keep Shabbos a little longer. On the other hand, let's say a person is, I know people don't do this, but let's say I hold 72, and you come to a shul that's holding 42. Again, I'm going the other way now. There's no reason for me to be crazy. I can go with them, daven. I see people do this all the time, daven with them, and that's it. Say everything the correct way. And if I personally want to be machmer upon myself to not to drive home at that particular moment, to stick around till 72, again, that's my business. But I don't have to stop the minyan. I don't have to make a noise to the minyan, because I know that they have that is legal what they're doing. So, and on two sides of that, you learn this on two sides. One, I can be machmer. I can follow a machmer ruling, a stringent ruling, even though I personally rule the opposite way. I say you could do it this way, but I'm not saying that it's forbidden to do that. You didn't say you have to be on the way. If you can stand, you can stand. The other one said, no, you have to stand. Rav Huna said you have to stand. He's willing you have to stand. So it would be interesting what he would do if the roles were reversed. Would he therefore say, okay, since he's walking, he's a knowledgeable, Rav Shesha is knowledgeable, therefore I don't want to break off. That would be interesting. Would he do because for him, it would be a b'diavad. It would be after the fact. So Mustama, I'm guessing he would also follow that principle. That if the other person is on the way, since the halacha would go with that, the halacha can go both ways.
So if you stop to stand, then you're delaying him, because he's saying it on the way.
Right, so I'm saying if I'm going with somebody, well, no, he wouldn't stop. What you're doing, and that's why I think Rav Huna would probably agree with what I'm saying. They said Tefillah Sederach, so they're traveling. Suddenly I say, oh, you stand Tefillah Sederach, I have to stand. The group says to you, good luck to you, we keep going. So now what happens is you stand and you put yourself into a situation where you put yourself in danger. So then if something happens to you, it's your fault. How do I know that? Because there's a Mishnah in Brachot that says, Beit Hillel said that when you're saying the Shema, you can walk. It says when you walk on the way, so you can be traveling. I'm sorry, that's what it was. When you're lying down, when you're rising up. So when I'm standing, when I'm moving, you can stand. Fine. Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai said you have to lie down for the nighttime. For the nighttime Shema. You have to lie down. So I forget who the rabbi was, but it's in the Mishnah. I forget his name though. But he decided that he was going to follow the opinion of Beit Shammai over Beit Hillel and lie down on to say Shema. And when he did that, he put himself into danger from the thieves that were in the streets, and Baruch Hashem, he escaped. The rabbi said to him, if you would have died, it would have been your fault. You would have committed suicide, basically. Because you observed the opinion of Beit Shammai, of Beit Hillel, and we don't rule like Beit Shammai. So using that sort of logic, I think Rav Huna would say that since there is an understanding that one can travel, if they're traveling and I'm going to be left standing by myself, therefore putting myself into danger, into harm's way, then it would be my fault if something happened, therefore I should travel. That's what I'm saying. I think that he would go the other way also. I think. I'm not 100%, I can't prove that more than what I've just done, but that would be my havami. That's where I would come from. That's my thesis. Okay, next one. So Tana Rabban, rabbis learned, Suma, Misha Eni Yachol Chavein et Haruchot, a blind person or somebody who doesn't know which direction. They're directionally challenged.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's such a word, but Yechavein libo keneged aviv sheba shamayim. When a person is going to pray, he should pray with his intending his heart towards his Father in heaven. Okay, so I am in a place where I don't know where the Beis HaMikdash would be.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter, right, left, or whatever it's going to be. I'm directionally challenged. So I should intend. How do I know that? Shenemar v'itpalu el Hashem Elokehem, because it says you shall pray. They will pray to the God, their God. Haya. So that's number one. So if I'm in a place where I'm in Eretz Yisrael, I'm guessing, and I don't know which direction the Kodesh HaKodashim is, so the Holy of Holies in the temple, so then I just intend my heart towards heaven. Because it says you're praying to the God, their God. Haya omed b'chutz la'aretz. Let's say I'm outside of Israel. Yechavein libo keneged Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, one should intend his heart toward Eretz Yisrael. And now it's interesting, the Gemara says one should intend their heart towards Eretz Yisrael instead of turning toward Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't say it should stand that way. It says you should turn your heart. How does it say it there? Does it have it? You have it there or not?
Well, it focuses thoughts on his Father in heaven, where it says they pray to God.
Right, and then the next one, where it says if you're outside the land of Israel.
If he's standing outside Eretz Yisrael, you should turn toward Eretz Yisrael.
Oh, so here it doesn't say that. That's what I'm saying.
Really?
It says you should. It says the Hebrew says that you should Yechavein libo keneged Eretz Yisrael. You should turn his heart. He should concentrate his heart opposite Eretz Yisrael. Not to,
I've heard that before.
Right, so it's not turn my body. It's not physically turn my body or face that. It's just my heart has to be facing that. And how do we know that? Because it says Hitpaldu elecha derech artzam, that they would pray to you.
They must have skipped that here, because this has to be assuming that you know what direction Eretz Yisrael is. It says turn to face it. You know? Does it get to that? Because then
no, you could say
then it talks about when you're in Eretz Yisrael.
Right.
I mean, it's progressing on down, getting closer and closer.
Oh, well, I don't get to that part.
Oh.
Do I?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're leaving some things out here.
Yeah, I don't know if I have that.
Yeah. Oh.
So it says, as a result of everybody doing that, it's nimsa kol shalach mechavnen et liban l'makom echad. So if everybody does that, we find that all the Jews are intending their heart, concentrating their heart to one place. So, and of course that's the power of prayer. We're all focusing our prayers to go to one place. Again, do I necessarily, according to this, have to be standing in one direction? In other words, everybody facing the same way? Ideally it's great, but if I don't know which way that is, so I shouldn't get all excited and pull out my compass.
The shul is built in different directions. We were talking about this before.
Right.
So you face Yaron.
Right.
Even though it's not east.
No, so if I know that it's not east, so according to what we
there was
a whole thing. So it says you should turn towards the east anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. And so even if the Aaron is to your back, I've yet to see people do that. Even if it would be halacha, I never see people doing that. I shouldn't say never. I've seen yeshiva guys do it.
Actually says to do that.
Well, that's what Rabbi Bowman is arguing. I didn't see it inside. I'm guessing. I don't think he would lie about it. But I'm not,
Yeah, like I say, in my very young days, in the 1950s, at the conservative synagogue, that was built where the Aron was to the south, I very distinctly remember people turning to their left, which would be east.
Well, in YU they didn't. In YU, even though it was to the wrong way, that's because it was parallel in the East River, whatever that river is. So it wasn't facing the East River; it was paralleling it. So, because I remember the river's here, and I was facing this way. And that's why I said to Rabbi Bowman when he was arguing, I said, either Breuer's is davening the wrong way, or YU is davening the wrong way. Somebody's davening because Breuer's was facing this way, and YU was facing that way. So, It can't be. And depending on where you were in YU, some people faced a different direction.
With that, yeah, again, like I said, when I heard Rabbi Cohen give a share about that, one could probably make the argument, what are we facing east for in general? Just because Eretz Israel is to the east, but the shortest route is going over the edge of Canada, going around the globe,
Really?
the way the airplanes fly.
Oh, okay, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, the Great Circle, that's the shortest Great Circle. Flying, if you're flying from New York, you're flying over Canada, over the edge of Canada.
Okay.
You're going, what was that? It would be northeast, and just straight around the globe that way is the shortest way.
So maybe that's what, okay. Maybe they're going the air route.
Yeah, so that's what. But again, that was the conclusion that Rabbi Cohen came to is that he liked the idea of facing the Aron and saying that our tefillas would go from the Aron, whatever the shortest route is to Yerushalayim. Whatever. Whether it's through the middle of the earth, around, whatever.
And that's what I'm saying. This Gemara is different than what we've always learned, and that is Yichaven Libo, his heart, should be concentrated on that. No, it doesn't matter which direction I'm facing.
Yeah.
Well, that's according to this Gemara. I'm not saying how we rule in practical terms here, but from this Gemara, it's just your heart should be. That's the language. Fine. So Amarav, Avin Vitemarav Avina Mikra. What is the pasuk that we learn this from? It says, "Kamigdal David Tzevarecha," like the Tower of David is your neck. Banoy letalpiot is built for talpiot. Now, what does talpiot mean? Talpiot is tail. I saw this. Where did I see this? I want to. Talpiot. It's split into 3 words. I just want to find who says it because I hate doing it by heart. Here it is. So it's tail. So Tosfot explains, tail shekol piot ponimbo, the mound that all mouths turn toward. It's a condensed the word talpiot. Really, the talpiot is talpiot, but talpiot is, they're saying it's a word that means tal, the tel, the mound shekol piot. That's the P. That all mouths ponim they turn toward it, which is Yerushalayim or the temple. And that's from the Tosfot. So it's interesting. And then finally, so that's why we're doing that. We're all facing it, so we all should have that intent. And then finally, to end off the 4th parak, we have the famous statement of Kama Yeshab Ben Tefillah Tefillah. How much time should you separate between one prayer to the other? So Rav Huna and Rav Chisda. So you have an argument between Rav Huna and Rav Chisda. Chalam Kadesh Shetitchonen Dai to Allah. So Rav Huna says so much time that you're going to, as Rashi explains, that his intent will be settled enough to set up his prayers in a matter of petition. And Chalam Kadesh Titcholel Datolav. And the other opinion says, in order that his language should be again a sort of petitioning to Hashem. Manda Amma, the one that says Shetit Chonein, the one of petition, that language, his head. So that's because it says V'et Chanan El Hashem. But Moshe says, I petitioned before Hashem to let me into the land of Israel, and he wouldn't. Umanda Amra Kadesh Shetit Cholel Da'at Olav. And the one that says, again, the language of Chalal, of going to pray that way. So he learned that from Moshe, where it says, Vayichal Moshe. And Moshe fell on his face to pray before Hashem with the instant of the red calf. Okay, so we'll stop there.